Can you give us some examples of what accommodations might look like for some of the disability categories? And how might these be mistaken for linguistic supports without multidisciplinary team input?
Definitely. So I think one that comes up often when we're looking at linguistic and accommodations is sentence frames. Um, so sentence frames, of course, they can be a linguistic support, helps them develop the academic language, but it also can be used as an accommodation for students that maybe have difficulty with processing, with the fine motor part of writing, right? And putting all those steps together. So I'm thinking of a student with autism, right? That might also have some fine motor needs. Um, and so with the autism and having the difficulty with processing, writing can kind of be difficult to recall some of that information. So by giving them sentence frames in this instance, it can kind of help with alleviate that processing, or not alleviate the processing, but the pressure to write, and help with processing, getting those thoughts moving so that they can kind of come up with some additional content. I don't know if Vanessa, if you wanted to add any other.
Yeah, so let's think some of the most frequently occurring disability
Mhm.
categories. Let's think SLD, right?
Okay.
Specific learning disability. And we know that there's like a three-pronged determination if SLD exists. And it must be related to a processing deficit, right? So a student might be needing some disability-related supports in relation to those processing deficits. Also, as Jessica mentioned, and for autism, some kiddos might have some specific needs. And let's think about OHI. So OHI is a really broad one, like SLD, where there could be a lot of processing issues. However, for OHI, I think one, which is other health impairment, I'm speaking in abbreviations here and acronyms. One of the most frequently occurring ones under OHI could be ADHD or ADD, right? So think of Jessica's example of sentence frames or any other support, right, that a student might use to help organize thoughts because of either the processing issue related to SLD, perhaps of the language need, not language acquisition, but language need, expressive receptive language for students with autism. We know that language can be greatly impacted for students with autism. And then think of students with ADHD that qualify under OHI. So I want us to think about, I think we need to think about how it is that students might engage with a task. So let's think about taking notes. Okay. So for a student who has some processing issues, for a student who might have visual motor integration issues, for a student who might have some executive functioning needs, the use of text to speech, speech to text to facilitate that process is related to the disability, not necessarily to the linguistic need. Now let's think about sentence frames as you're completing a task. That is going to be supportive for a student who has ADHD in helping organize their thought process, where without that support, they might be unable to complete the task. And it's not because they need that as a linguistic support, it's more related to organization and conveyance of what they know. For a child with autism, some of our students with autism have some OT, occupational therapy supports also embedded in their IEP, whether it be as a service written in or at least an evaluation or some recommendations where assistive technology might figure largely in the student's IEP. So some assistive technology pieces are going to look like specialized paper. It's going to look like graphic organizers. It's going to look like, some software, some tools to be able to gather thoughts, right? And then we're also thinking of students with specific learning disability. And I touched on earlier students who might have visual motor integration issues. And that's not to mention also students that struggle with dysgraphia, right? Being able to write. So that is more related to a specific disability need, AKA an accommodation, right? Versus supporting the acquisition of that language, of producing the language in a classroom environment. So you walk in with your OPTEL protocol, you're observing whole class instruction, small group or individual during ELA, and you see a student who is utilizing a graphic organizer with embedded sentence frames. You have had a meeting with the multidisciplinary team and you're well aware that these are listed as accommodations, and the student is using them appropriately to be able to engage with the content and show what they know, we know that is no longer a linguistic support, because you have that clarity from having met with the team, from having seen it documented in the IEP, and from having that conversation with the case manager and other service providers involved, as well as having witnessed it across contexts with the student, right? To be able to produce the content that it is that they're being held responsible for in the task that's being observed.
I want to add, just like you're highlighting that pre-meeting, without that, if someone were to walk in, those supports can seem really similar to a linguistic support, just visually, graphic organizer, whatever that might be. So it can be easily mistaken without those lenses or without that information. So a pre-meeting, a talk in the hallway, a review of the accommodations are really important to just be able to come in and to see what those supports truly are.